What's up, folks? Casual Dad here with another Warhammer Combat Cards Warlord guide. And this time here we're going to talk about Ghazghkull Thrakka. Ghazghkull Thrakka. Those H's better be silent because they're just doing too much work. I only recently learned how to actually spell this guy's name, and I wish I hadn't. I just call him Gaz. But even saying Gaz, you got to throw an H in there just to mess with you. GW. What are you guys doing? Anyway, I had this guy in a warlord guide that was three warlords in one. It was my bruiser's guide that included Abaddon, Ghazghkull, and the Avatar. That did cause some confusion, so I've gone ahead and split them up and added an individual video for each, which I'd kind of planned to do long term anyway. Um, but of the three, Abaddon is the most outright aggressive because he wants to be played as early as possible. The Avatar is the most durable and the most competitive. Ghazghkull is the most I don't know which. Face smashing? Of the three, he's the one that's going to hit the table the hardest and just do utterly devastating things, which is kind of fun. All three of them are relatively high cost. They have very high melee attack stats. They all have good hit points for their abilities, and they all include fear as one of their traits, and they're all legendary. That's why I kind of bundled them together, and their playstyle is somewhat similar. Of the three, the Avatar has the most impact on the board until he comes out. Abaddon has the most impact, or the least impact until he comes out. And Gaz is kind of somewhere in the middle because his trait does have an impact during the game until you play him, but it doesn't actually impact anything until you do play him. So we're looking at his stats here. Another key thing, too, is of the three, both the Avatar, they all have their stats are, or their traits are, sorry, their traits are really meant to kind of emphasize the way they play and the character of the warlords. And this is one of my favorite things about adding those secondary traits to cards. It really does let you kind of define the character of the personality of a character by way of their traits. Abaddon has fear and inspiring presence because he is a terrifying leader of scary, scary things. The Avatar has inspiring presence and then fear because it is a very motivational speaker for the Eldar, but also quite scary. And then Gaz has furious charge and then fear because he wants to run in and punch things, and he wants to punch them with his face. So depending on which way you kind of want to go, that would sort of drive you towards Gaz, Abaddon, or the Avatar, whatever. I really like Gaz just for his straight up pure offense, punchy, punchy. Yeah, level dependent. He is legendary, so he does start out being pretty impressive once you get to about level 5. Um, I wouldn't take him below level 4. You really do want that range stat and then buff of damage, and then of course it just keeps getting better from there. I've gotten some really lucky drops and had Gaz for a long time, and also he's one of my most successful warlords in a faction I play a lot, and so I did get him up to level 9 and just got him to maximum Furious Charge, which is so satisfying. Because you look at his base 93 melee at this point, which is good, but then also his ability, or his ability. When one of your Ork cards, important if you have a mixed deck there, destroys an enemy card, this warlord, whether deployed or not, gains plus 10 melee attack. Now, it only affects him. It's only plus 10, which doesn't seem that high, but it could be lower. And it's only to melee. So all of these are kind of things where he ends up being kind of a one-trick pony, sort of. Except as you can see, he does have a decent range stat, so he can hit harder than that. Also has fear, so he has a lot of staying power, but he is utterly devastating when he hits the board. Once you get that max level Furious Charge, he will hit with a minimum of 93 twice. Great card. But we'll go ahead and talk about some deck building with him. He is very aggressive, but it's also one of those cases where he is the most beneficial in your deck if you're going to play him. And he does come in at 46 points, which isn't super expensive, but it's at the point where it does start eating up your deck to the point where you do want to kind of balance it out. And you want to play him again, so you want a deck that is aggressive, flexible, and also is durable to the point where it won't fold completely, where it'll still be on the board when you do play Gaz, but also thin enough that you want Gaz himself to hit the board at some point, because he himself does have a huge impact, and you want to benefit from that. You can see that I've got... Oh, another thing too. Well, anyway, I've got this guy here as a nice balance of stats. If you get a decent level of this guy, and I'm only sitting at level 6, this thing is terrifying. Very high melee stat, has both Furious Charge and melee ready, which combos great with everything else in the deck. Good hit points, comes in at 50 points, which is risky, but still very good. And then, of course, I'm backed up by this guy, which is the most on-the-drop aggressive melee card I have, because I'm focusing very hard on melee here. So he hits at a decent price point, good hit points, hits very, very hard in melee, that only gets higher because of Berserk. I'm rounding that out with my Furious Charge, High Melee, Inspiring Presence. This guy is terrific once you get up to kind of upper level with him. He is epic, so that takes a while, but really, really strong piece. Has that Furious Charge to kind of get kills that way, Inspiring Presence, and decent attack stats for the cost and the hit points. And then I'm rounding that out with some utility pieces. I've got my Taunt. Amazing card in your Orc decks, by the way. One of the best Orc cards out there. If you have space and don't have a bunch of Taunt already, great one to consider in any deck. And then, of course, we've got Baza, who's only here to be a 6-point target acquired. And then we've got our, rounding it out, our 8-point melee ready. Now, if you really want to be thematic with Ghaz, you want to make sure your 8-point hole is filled by Makari, the greatest Garrote, this guy right here, because he is Ghazghkull's buddy. There's everything. Yeah, personal battle standard bearer of Ghazghkull Thrakka. So if you're running a thematic deck, he should be in there. For me, to be a little bit more competitive, my Inspiring Presence was already being filled by this guy, so I did swap them around a bit. But I am still trying to run all Goffs, which I believe I've done. Goffs, yeah, except for this guy. So I've messed it up. He's a Snakebite. Oh, he's a Goff. Hey, good stuff. Okay, so this is all Goffs. And when possible, I try to make my competitive decks also themed around the Warlord's personal band or flavor, which in this case is Goffs for Ghazghkull. So there we go. Some other really strong pieces. We already talked about Makari. He does okay with endless cards just to kind of fill the deck, but really you want aggressive cards that get kills. So this is a really strong piece to consider for filling in your cheap holes because he's got 5 points and does a really high melee attack for it, and will always do damage even if he's killed quickly because he has Death Blow. Also does come in with Death Blow and Furious Charge, which is so much fun once you get him to level 9, which takes for freaking ever because he's epic. I did want to highlight that 4 of my 6 cards in this deck are common. So these are things you can easily pull in, and then you end up with 79 points to fill with whatever you have that's really good. That is one thing I like about Ghaz. He himself is legendary, but you do tend to level Warlords faster than the other cards. And these are some cards that can really benefit from him or benefit him as well. Outflank is good. Let's see, going through here, Medicae is good to keep Ghaz himself alive, but then also to keep your other cards alive. Shields are really good to help hold down a lane. Furious Charge, of course, is great, and this guy comes in with a pretty stellar melee attack stat on top of that Furious Charge for 14 points. And kind of got a theme here. So melee readies will help power up your melee attacks. Medicae will keep your punchers alive. Spookums is an excellent piece for that high melee target acquired. If you have the points for him instead of doing Baza. Baza, of course, Spookums he's got the better name, of course. Also, he's just flat better. If you have the points and don't have your target acquired yet, use Spookums. If you only have a couple points to spare, use Baza, of course. This guy's not bad. Is okay. A little Medicae, of course. Then we get into the more expensive ones. This guy is phenomenal, just because he's got the combination of regen, Medicae, and also has a really high attack stat. I actually don't have him in this deck because he dies too slowly, because I want to play Ghaz. But if you want a really sort of stocky, punchy, really solid Ghaz deck, this is a really strong piece to put in here, especially if you have him at higher level. He is not a Goff. Shame. Oh well. That's probably why I took him out. This guy also combos well. Of course, any of your outflanks or melee readies are really good. Berserk is really good. One thing you will see a lot of players do, and a lot of the time you'll see against Ghaz, is they will bring a ranged deck. So it all uses your shooting cards to build up that attack stat, because Ghaz's ability does not say it has to kill it with a melee attack, which is important to note. So you get heavy on your barrage, heavy on your precision shot, hit really hard. And that both charges up Ghaz himself, but then also charges Ghaz up with a melee ready. So you can kind of do a percent boost on that. Personally, I think you don't need that, especially if your Ghazghkull is high enough level where he's already got a really high base stat. He does enough between his trait and then also his just base stats. You don't need the melee ready. And one of the downsides to that deck is you spend so many points in each individual attack card that it becomes even thinner. And I don't personally find it as much fun. There are other shooting warlords, go ahead and do that. Let Ghaz be one of the melee ones. But teach their own, of course. Okay, we're up against Illic. That is kind of a problem. Ooh, oh boy. Illic being the warlord who does... Ooh, yeah, there we go. Who outright kills cards if they take up to, 65% of their base health and ranged attack on the opening shot. I don't think that was enough. That is. and it's in a single turn. So I did have a little room to wiggle there, but not a whole lot. So that was quite scary. So I have to. Now the good news is that this guy has now taken some ranged damage, so he's now not vulnerable to that again, which is great. Because Illich's ability only triggers if that range damage is done all in the same turn. Now, okay, this would have been an interesting matchup. This would have been a horrible matchup if this was a range deck, because it would be much thinner. Each of your individual cards would be a lot more vulnerable to Illich's ability. And if you did start losing cards, you'd have less to fall back on, because the deck would be a little bit smaller. Ouch. So I do think that this was the correct choice for me. But we'll see. And already have the opportunity to play Ghaz, so I'll probably play him sooner than later, because he already has a melee stat of 103. Very nice. So I've gotten a single melee kill. We'll try to pull that up here. Oh yeah, that's so. And there, orcs do melee so well with that inspiring presence, high base stats, and then that melee ready. Oof, boy, that was a magnificent turn. And Illich is one of those warlords you don't want to play your big punchy warlords against early, because he has that target acquired that will target a warlord, and then also the trait that will kill your warlord even if he's not actually killed outright. So extremely scary. You want to put something in front of him that is not a warlord. But we're going to drop Ghaz, and he's going to just one-shot this thing. So you're going to see how punchy he is. Also classifies in my, I talk about momentum decks that are decks designed to play games very quickly and either win or lose very quickly to let you ladder up fast. And Ghaz is just phenomenal in that regard. That game was so fast. So we're going to play another one. Do love me some Ghaz. I am also not laddering orcs in this. I am not laddering orcs in this season, so I'm going up against kind of squishier matchups. But that's another case where if you're trying to ladder quickly at the start of the season, when you've lost all your trophies, you can go so slowly. And so it's really satisfying to have decks or keep decks in your pocket that level very aggressively, especially if they're in factions that have. Ooh, this is going to be interesting. Factions that have your top tier competitive decks that you can switch to later if you start having trouble. Ghaz is one of the more competitive warlords that I consider in my momentum decks. He is very punchy and particularly good in kind of the current sort of meta landscape. But he does have some weaknesses and can struggle if you hit your weaknesses often. So that is something important to look for. This is going to be an interesting match because Canoness decks really benefit from the attrition, because the cards you don't want to kill are the ones that die first. And every time you kill a card, you take a lot of punishment for it. But we'll see how this goes. Because one great thing about Ghaz is he charges the two great things about this matchup. Number one, Ghaz is really ridiculously powerful by the time you launch him, and Canoness decks tend to be bigger. So I've got a lot more stuff to work through to build up some good offense for Ghaz himself. Also, Ghaz can usually hit hard enough to punch straight through shields, which is great. I'm going to go ahead and take this out and try to get to that second copy sooner. And the Canoness has shields, but her hit points are not really all that high. Ooh, that was interesting. Ooh, ouch. And because her hit points aren't all that high, if you do enough damage to overflow her shields, or you can fairly quickly. Oh god, okay. I said oh god because this is not really where I want to be. Yeah, you know what? Let's do it. Let's do it. Go Ghaz, go to town. And having that max level Furious Charge, he will just take this guy out right away. That fear should keep him alive for a little bit longer, but this is not great. The good thing about this is I have limited who's going to hit back. And it's going to be this poor schmuck. Because there's just nothing else left on the board. Oh my god, he hits so hard. And as he's just getting kills, he's getting himself more powerful too. So playing him early is always very risky, but it's also a very powerful way to play him because he is one of the best cards to charge up himself. No surprise there. See how this goes. It's your melee stat 123. That's not going to be enough to take this thing down. So you may see me do some cowardly readies here. Not cowardly, there's nothing wrong with readying. So I think I've got this, but this is a real challenging matchup. And now I'm second guessing, am I actually laddering orcs this season? We'll see. Because I'm sitting at almost 2k trophies. I wouldn't expect that for a faction I'm not laddering right now. So I'll have to double check that in a second. But Not important. Anyway, what you're seeing is a pretty decent matchup here and a nail biter. I'm pretty sure I've got this just because he doesn't have the power to punch through Ghaz, and I do have enough to punch through this, and I should comfortably punch right through the Canoness's shields, even if it does cost me my flunky over here. Yeah, I got lucky. That could have been a really, really tough matchup, but all of my tools came in really important. Furious Charge, Taunt, Inspiring Presence, and all of those melee readies were really, really important to get to this point. And now she's only got shields too, so we don't even get to see Ghaz punch straight through the shields. But look at that guy. Base melee damage of 163. Yeah, he's a monster. Oh, we do get to see Ghaz. Anyway, but he doesn't punch through the shields. Yeah, there you have it. That was two. Those were so fast. I'm going to play one more just because I love Ghaz. He was another one of those warlords who was really successful for me early on when I was first starting to ladder, and we have phalanx. When I was first starting competitive ladder, he was one of the ones I was successful with first because I had decently leveled orcs, and his ability is one of the more new player friendly ones because even if his initial stats are fairly low, his ability is to crank up his melee stat. So he ends up being quite powerful at low level against other low level decks. Of course, you hit a ceiling until you start getting a higher level, but yeah. Ooh, bummer. Okay. And of course it's Zag, so he's going to hit first. Yikes. Okay. Whoa, boy. All right. So good and bad. Bad being that is a lot of beef to go across right away. Good being those are pretty expensive cards. So seeing those on the board means that what I'm going to run into next is not very impressive. But this is going to be brutal. Orcs versus orcs should be brutal. It's perfect. I really need. Oh no. I really need to watch out for this thing because that big game hunter on the stats this thing has. It's not so bad, but yeah, we're gonna take care of that. Ooh, boy. Yeah, I'm definitely laddering orcs this season based on where this guy is in trophy count, which is great. Okay, cool. So all three of the warlords I just showed, I'm actively laddering right now, which is good. I like to see somewhat competitive matchups when I'm actually doing these guides, and I got them with these. We are going to play Ghaz early this game, both because we kind of have to, and because I know this is great. So this Furious Charge will almost always, usually, you want to time it so it will clear an opposing bodyguard um, so that you can then double down on an off lane. So hit that, and then I should have enough offensive punch to take this guy down between those two, especially with that Furious Charge. So we'll clear this. It'll be Ghaz versus Zagstruck, which is not a matchup Zagstruck wants. And I should comfortably finish this out. And I feel fairly confident doing that because the first couple cards that dropped were really, really expensive. So the other stuff isn't going to be as expensive. I love to see this. I really want to play more with Psychic Orcs. And this dude went for it. Darkname went for a fully Psychic Zagstruck, which is phenomenal. Yeah, and he's definitely got the card levels to start getting there too. It can be really, really powerful. I don't know that it's the most powerful. Well, anyway, we'll talk about it later, but I love to see it. Very, very pleased. But we're going to see. Oh, actually, that's pretty close. If his melee buff is enough to actually do 113 damage, which it might be, but here's where the fear comes in. If you have a couple levels of fear, it will keep Ghaz alive in cases where he shouldn't be. If I didn't have that fear, he probably would have won this. But yeah, love it. Ghaz is just on the board swinging, and boy, does he swing. Once at max level, Ghazghkull is one of the warlords I would pit up against the Swarmlord as one that could potentially beat it. I think the Swarmlord would probably win that max to max, but you never know. It depends on how much stuff Ghaz chainsawed through to get there. Who had first turn, whatever else is in the wings, anything there. But yeah, he's a super fun warlord. Hopefully you enjoyed this one, and until next time.